Tower, this is American 1493. We're ready for takeoff on runway 24 left. American 1493, hold short of runway 24 left. I have traffic on final approach. The controller's voice carried the weight of exhaustion after 16 grueling hours of consecutive duty, his eyes burning from the relentless focus required to manage one of the world's busiest airports. Los Angeles International Airport on February 1, 1991, was operating under heavy traffic conditions with reduced visibility due to ground fog that had settled over the sprawling complex like a suffocating blanket. Robin Lee Washer, an experienced air traffic controller, had been working since early morning, managing the intricate dance of aircraft arrivals and departures that defines modern aviation. The fatigue gnawing at her concentration would soon manifest in a split-second decision that would forever change aviation safety protocols and haunt the families of 34 innocent souls who boarded their flights that evening, never expecting their routine journey to become a nightmare written in fire and twisted metal. The fog rolled in from the Pacific Ocean like nature's cruel curtain, obscuring the runway lights and taxiways that normally provided clear visual reference points for controllers monitoring aircraft movements from their elevated tower position. The Boeing 737-300, operated by U.S. Air Flight 1493, had originated from Columbus, Ohio, carrying 89 passengers and crew members who represented the beautiful tapestry of human life. Business travelers returning from meetings, families reuniting after time apart, students heading back to California universities, each person aboard carrying their own dreams, hopes, and stories that would tragically intersect on that fog-shrouded runway. Captain Colin Shaw, a veteran pilot with over 10,000 flight hours, sat alongside First Officer David Kelly, a competent aviator who had demonstrated exceptional skill throughout his career. The flight attendants, led by senior crew member Deborah Neal, had completed their final safety checks as the aircraft approached Los Angeles, the city lights twinkling below like scattered diamonds against the dark Pacific coastline. The passengers settled into their seats, many already thinking about their evening plans, completely unaware that their aircraft was about to become the focal point of one of aviation history's most preventable disasters. Among those aboard were Margaret Thompson, a grandmother traveling to visit her new granddaughter, Robert Martinez, a college student returning from winter break, and Dr. Patricia Williams, a surgeon heading home after presenting research at a medical conference. Their individual stories, dreams, and aspirations would soon become part of a tragedy that would reshape how the aviation industry approaches runway safety and human performance limitations. Ground controller Robin Lee Washer had been managing multiple aircraft movements simultaneously, her attention divided between incoming flights requiring gate assignments and departing aircraft awaiting takeoff clearance. The Federal Aviation Administration had implemented procedures designed to prevent runway incursions, but the human element remained the most unpredictable variable in the complex equation of airport operations. Fatigue had become a silent epidemic among air traffic controllers, with mandatory overtime and understaffing creating conditions where exhausted personnel were expected to maintain perfect situational awareness during critical phases of flight operations. Washer's shift had extended far beyond normal parameters, her cognitive abilities diminished by the physiological effects of sleep deprivation that aviation psychologists would later identify as equivalent to legal intoxication. The control tower overlooking LAX provided an elevated perspective of the airport's 4 parallel runways, but ground fog had reduced visibility to less than 1/4 mile, forcing controllers to rely heavily on radar displays and radio communications to track aircraft positions. The radar equipment available in 1991, while sophisticated for its time, possessed inherent limitations that would prove catastrophic under the challenging conditions developing that February evening. Weather reporting stations throughout the Los Angeles basin had been tracking the marine layer as it moved inland, but the density and persistence of the fog exceeded forecast parameters, creating visibility conditions that pushed human performance beyond safe operational limits. U.S. Air Flight 1493 received its final approach clearance as Captain Shaw configured the Boeing 737 for landing, the aircraft's sophisticated navigation systems guiding them through the instrument approach procedure with mechanical precision. The passengers felt the familiar sensation of descent as the aircraft penetrated the marine layer. The cabin lights dimmed for landing as flight attendants secured loose items and verified that seatbelts were properly fastened. First Officer Kelly monitored the approach parameters, calling out altitude and airspeed deviations, while maintaining radio communication with Los Angeles approach control. The runway lights of 24 left emerged from the fog like a golden pathway stretching into the darkness, offering what appeared to be a routine conclusion to an otherwise unremarkable cross-country flight. Captain Shaw applied gentle back pressure to the yoke as the Boeing 737's main landing gear touched down on the asphalt surface, the aircraft's weight transferring from its wings to the runway as reverse thrust and wheel brakes began the deceleration process. The landing was textbook perfect, executed with the precision that comes from thousands of hours of training and experience, yet within seconds it would transform into every pilot's worst nightmare as reality revealed the deadly trap that had been set by a series of seemingly innocent decisions and communication failures. Meanwhile, SkyWest Flight 5569, a twin-engine Fairchild Metroliner operating under the SkyWest Airlines banner, had been holding short of the same runway awaiting takeoff clearance for their scheduled departure to Palmdale, California. The 19-seat commuter aircraft carried 12 souls, including 2 crew members, representing the regional airline sector that served smaller communities throughout the western United States. Captain Raymond Lucas and First Officer James Schifferns had completed their pre-takeoff checks, the twin turboprop engines running smoothly as they awaited permission to enter the active runway. The SkyWest aircraft, significantly smaller than the approaching U.S. Air Boeing 737, occupied a position that should have been clearly visible to air traffic control under normal visibility conditions. However, the persistent ground fog had created a hazardous environment where visual confirmation of aircraft positions became nearly impossible, forcing controllers to rely on pilot position reports and radar tracking systems that possessed inherent limitations in accurately depicting ground movements. The regional airline industry in 1991 operated under different regulatory frameworks than major carriers, with less sophisticated equipment and training requirements that would later be identified as contributing factors in the developing tragedy. Captain Lucas, an experienced pilot with regional airlines, had navigated similar weather conditions throughout his career. But the unique challenges presented by LAX's complex runway system during low-visibility operations created circumstances unlike anything in his previous experience. Controller Robin Lee Washer's attention was simultaneously focused on multiple aircraft, requiring different types of clearances and coordination, her mental workload approaching the threshold where human performance begins to degrade significantly. The combination of extended duty time, reduced visibility conditions, and high traffic volume created what aviation safety experts term a perfect storm of contributing factors. At approximately 6:07 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Washer transmitted a clearance that would initiate a catastrophic chain of events, her voice carrying across the radio frequencies monitored by pilots throughout the Los Angeles terminal area. SkyWest 5569, taxi into position and hold runway 24 left. The Fairchild Metroliner began its movement onto the active runway surface, positioning itself for takeoff while U.S. Air Flight 1493 continued its approach from the opposite direction, both aircraft now occupying the same piece of asphalt separated only by distance and time. The phrase, position and hold, represented standard phraseology designed to expedite traffic flow during busy periods, but its execution required precise timing and constant situational awareness that had become compromised by the environmental and physiological factors affecting the control tower that evening. Radio frequency congestion added another layer of complexity as multiple aircraft attempted to communicate with ground control simultaneously, creating opportunities for missed transmissions and misunderstood clearances that would have devastating consequences. The Boeing 737's landing lights pierced through the fog as Captain Shaw maintained the aircraft on the runway centerline, unaware that another aircraft had been cleared onto the same surface ahead of their touchdown point. Standard operating procedures required positive separation between all aircraft movements, with specific protocols governing runway occupancy during active arrival and departure operations. The SkyWest crew, following their assigned clearance, positioned their aircraft approximately 3,000 feet down the runway from the approach threshold, placing them directly in the path of the incoming U.S. Air flight. Ground-based radar systems possessed limitations in tracking aircraft during certain phases of movement, particularly when smaller aircraft were stationary on runway surfaces surrounded by ground clutter and weather returns. The technological systems available in 1991, while sophisticated for their era, lacked the precision and reliability that modern airport surface detection equipment would later provide to prevent similar occurrences. Airport lighting systems, designed to provide visual guidance during low visibility operations, created confusing shadows and reflections in the dense fog that further complicated the controller's ability to maintain accurate situational awareness of aircraft positions throughout the airport surface movement area. First Officer Kelly aboard U.S. Air Flight 1493 was the first to visually acquire the SkyWest aircraft through the fog, his training immediately recognizing the imminent danger posed by another aircraft occupying their landing runway. "There's someone on the runway!" Kelly shouted, his voice cutting through the cockpit ambient noise as Captain Shaw simultaneously applied maximum braking and attempted to steer the Boeing 737 away from the collision course. The laws of physics, however, had already determined the outcome, as the massive momentum of an 80-ton aircraft traveling at landing speed could not be overcome by the limited time and distance available. The SkyWest crew, realizing the approaching danger, attempted to clear the runway by advancing their throttles to take off power, but their smaller aircraft lacked sufficient acceleration to escape the collision envelope that was rapidly closing around them. Captain Lucas pushed the throttles forward with desperate urgency, knowing that his aircraft's twin turboprop engines would require precious seconds to develop the thrust necessary for acceleration, seconds that simply did not exist as the Boeing 737's landing lights grew larger through their windscreen like approaching doom. The physics of the situation had created an inescapable trap where two professional flight crews, despite their training and quick reactions, found themselves powerless to prevent the catastrophic collision that would claim the lives of everyone aboard the smaller aircraft and nearly 24 passengers on the approaching jetliner.
The impact occurred at 6:08 p.m. with devastating consequences, as the Boeing 737's left main landing gear struck the SkyWest Metro liner near the smaller aircraft's center section, the tremendous kinetic energy instantly destroying the structural integrity of the commuter plane. All 12 occupants of SkyWest Flight 5569 perished immediately upon impact. Their lives ended in a microsecond of twisted metal and explosive forces that no human body could survive.
The U.S. Air aircraft, damaged but still controllable, continued down the runway with Captain Shaw fighting to maintain directional control as pieces of debris and aviation fuel created a hazardous obstacle course ahead of them. The Boeing 737's structure, designed to withstand significant impact forces, had absorbed the collision energy while protecting most of the occupants in the main cabin, though the aircraft's fuel systems had been compromised, creating an immediate fire hazard that would soon engulf the wreckage. Jet fuel, spilled from ruptured tanks and fuel lines, began pooling beneath both aircraft as sparks from grinding metal ignited vapors that would transform the accident scene into a raging inferno within minutes of the initial impact. The sound of the collision, described by witnesses as resembling thunder mixed with the screech of tearing metal, carried across the airport despite the muffling effects of the dense fog that had contributed to the tragedy's occurrence. Emergency response teams stationed throughout Los Angeles International Airport received immediate notification of the runway collision, their training and equipment representing the difference between a tragic accident and a complete catastrophe. Fire rescue vehicles raced across the airport surface, their warning lights cutting through the fog as trained personnel prepared to execute emergency procedures that had been rehearsed countless times, but never under such horrific real-world conditions. The Boeing 737 came to rest approximately 1,500 feet beyond the initial impact point, its structure compromised but largely intact as aviation fuel began pooling beneath the aircraft. Captain Shaw and First Officer Kelly, both injured but conscious, immediately initiated emergency evacuation procedures, while flight attendants throughout the cabin shouted evacuation commands to passengers who were struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. The aircraft's emergency lighting systems activated automatically, providing illumination that would prove critical as smoke began filling the cabin from fires burning beneath the fuselage. Airport crash rescue vehicles, equipped with specialized foam and water systems designed for aviation accidents, encountered significant challenges navigating through the fog to reach the accident scene, precious minutes passing as responders struggled to locate the wreckage using only radio communications and thermal imaging equipment that provided limited effectiveness in the existing weather conditions. The cabin of US Air Flight 1493 filled with acrid smoke as fuel fires ignited beneath the aircraft, creating a race against time as passengers and crew members fought to escape through available exits. 22 souls aboard the US Air Flight would perish from smoke inhalation and burn injuries, their tragic deaths occurring not from the initial impact, but from the secondary effects of fire and toxic gases that filled the cabin faster than evacuation procedures could remove everyone to safety. Survivors described scenes of incredible heroism as passengers assisted each other toward emergency exits, flight attendants remaining at their posts until the last possible moment to ensure maximum passenger survival. The fog that had contributed to the controller's inability to see both aircraft now hampered rescue operations as emergency personnel struggled to locate survivors and establish effective firefighting positions around the burning wreckage. Flight attendant Deborah Neal, despite suffering severe injuries in the impact, continued directing passengers toward functional exits, even as smoke and flames made breathing nearly impossible, her actions saving countless lives before she succumbed to smoke inhalation just moments before rescue personnel reached her position. Passengers like Margaret Thompson and Robert Martinez, who had survived the initial collision, found themselves trapped in the rapidly deteriorating cabin environment, where visibility dropped to zero and temperatures rose beyond human tolerance within minutes of the impact. The aircraft's evacuation slides, designed for rapid egress during emergency situations, deployed properly on some exits, while others became blocked by debris or compromised by fire damage, forcing survivors to find alternative escape routes through the smoke-filled cabin. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you been on a plane and taken for granted that the people controlling your safety are fighting their own battles with exhaustion and impossible working conditions? Right now, there might be someone reading this who works in aviation, someone who understands the crushing weight of responsibility that comes with holding other people's lives in your hands. If that's you, or if you've ever wondered what really goes through the minds of the people who keep us safe in the sky, share your thoughts in the comments. Write something like, "The human factor is what scares me most about flying," and let's start a conversation about how we can better support the people who dedicate their lives to our safety. Your voice matters in this discussion because these aren't just workplace safety issues. They're about real human beings trying to do impossible jobs under crushing pressure. The National Transportation Safety Board investigation that followed revealed a complex web of contributing factors that extended far beyond the single moment when Controller Washer issued conflicting clearances to both aircraft. Fatigue management protocols within the Federal Aviation Administration had failed to adequately protect air traffic controllers from the cognitive impairment associated with extended duty periods, while technological systems lacked the sophistication necessary to provide positive runway conflict alerts during low-visibility operations. The investigation uncovered systemic issues within air traffic control operations, including inadequate rest requirements, insufficient staffing levels, and training deficiencies related to managing high workload situations during adverse weather conditions. Controller Robin Lee Washer, despite her experience and professional competence, had been placed in an untenable situation where human performance limitations were exceeded by operational demands that should have been recognized and mitigated through better management practices. The investigation revealed that Washer had been working since 2 a.m. that morning, having been called in early to cover for another controller who had called in sick, creating a duty period that violated established fatigue management principles even by 1991 standards. Federal investigators discovered that such extended duty periods had become routine at major airports where understaffing and budget constraints forced controllers to work far beyond recommended limits, creating systemic vulnerabilities that made accidents like the LAX collision not just possible but statistically inevitable given enough time and exposure to high-risk conditions. The wreckage of both aircraft remained on the runway for several days, as investigators meticulously documented every piece of evidence that might provide insight into the sequence of events leading to the collision. Cockpit voice recorders from both aircraft revealed the final moments of each flight, providing investigators with precise timing of radio transmissions and crew actions during the critical seconds before impact. Flight data recorders captured the mechanical parameters of both aircraft, confirming the impact sequence and documenting the heroic efforts of both flight crews, to avoid the collision once they became aware of the dangerous situation developing ahead of them. The investigation also examined air traffic control recordings, radar data, and weather information to construct a comprehensive timeline that would ultimately lead to significant changes in aviation safety protocols. Forensic analysis of the wreckage revealed that both aircraft had been operating normally until the moment of collision, with no mechanical defects or system failures contributing to the accident sequence. The SkyWest Metroliner's remains provided evidence of the tremendous forces involved in the collision, with investigators noting that the smaller aircraft had been completely destroyed by the impact with the Boeing 737's landing gear. Toxicology reports confirmed that neither flight crew showed evidence of alcohol or drug impairment, while medical examinations revealed no conditions that might have affected their performance during the accident sequence. The investigation's scope eventually expanded to examine similar incidents at other airports, revealing a pattern of near misses and operational deficiencies that had gone largely unaddressed by federal oversight agencies. Federal investigators discovered that the ground radar system at Los Angeles International Airport possessed known limitations in tracking small aircraft on runway surfaces, particularly during weather conditions that created false returns and masked actual aircraft positions. The SkyWest Metroliner, being significantly smaller than typical commercial aircraft, produced a radar signature that could be easily obscured by ground clutter or atmospheric interference. Additionally, the airport's ground control procedures lacked redundant safety systems that might have provided backup verification of runway occupancy before issuing conflicting clearances to multiple aircraft. The investigation revealed that similar near-miss incidents had occurred at other major airports, suggesting that the LAX collision represented a systemic vulnerability rather than an isolated occurrence of human error. Airport surface detection technology in 1991 relied heavily on primary radar systems that could not distinguish between moving and stationary targets with sufficient precision to prevent runway incursions during low visibility conditions. The investigation also revealed communication protocol deficiencies that allowed conflicting clearances to be issued without triggering automatic warning systems or requiring controller verification procedures. Weather monitoring systems at LAX had provided adequate advance warning of deteriorating visibility conditions, but airport operations continued without implementing enhanced safety protocols that might have reduced the risk of ground accidents during the foggy conditions that persisted throughout the evening. The families of the 34 victims faced the devastating reality of lives cut short by preventable circumstances, their grief compounded by the knowledge that better procedures and technology might have prevented the tragedy entirely. Survivors from U.S. Air Flight 1493 struggled with physical injuries and psychological trauma that would affect them for years following the accident, many requiring extensive medical treatment and counseling to cope with the aftermath of their terrifying experience. The aviation industry, recognizing the magnitude of change required to prevent similar occurrences, began implementing comprehensive reforms targeting air traffic control procedures, runway safety technology, and fatigue management protocols. These changes would ultimately save countless lives by addressing the root causes that had made the February 1st collision not just possible, but perhaps inevitable under the existing operational framework. Legal proceedings following the accident resulted in significant settlements for victim families, though no amount of financial compensation could restore the lives lost or heal the emotional wounds inflicted on survivors and families affected by the tragedy. The psychological impact on emergency responders, airport personnel, and other pilots who witnessed the aftermath created secondary victims whose trauma required recognition and treatment in the years following the accident. Support groups formed among survivors and family members provided crucial emotional assistance during the long recovery process, while advocacy organizations used the tragedy to push for legislative reforms that would prevent similar accidents in the future. Ground proximity warning systems installed in modern aircraft now provide pilots with immediate alerts when conflicting traffic is detected on active runways, while airport surface detection equipment can track aircraft movements with precision that was unimaginable in 1991. Air traffic controllers now operate under strict duty time limitations designed to prevent fatigue-related performance degradation, while backup systems provide multiple layers of verification before aircraft are cleared onto active runway surfaces. The Federal Aviation Administration mandated installation of transponder systems that allow precise tracking of all aircraft within airport environments, eliminating the radar blind spots that had contributed to the Los Angeles collision. These technological and procedural improvements represent the legacy of those 34 souls who perished, their sacrifice driving innovations that continue protecting air travelers decades later. Modern airport operations centers utilize integrated safety management systems that provide real-time monitoring of runway occupancy, weather conditions, and controller workload factors that contributed to the 1991 tragedy. Advanced communication systems now require positive acknowledgement of all clearances, while providing automatic conflict detection capabilities that would have prevented the conflicting instructions issued to both aircraft on that foggy February evening. Training programs for air traffic controllers now emphasize human factors, awareness, stress recognition, and fatigue management techniques designed to maintain optimal performance during high workload situations that previously overwhelmed human capabilities. The courage displayed by emergency responders, flight crews, and passengers during those horrific moments in February 1991 exemplified the best of human nature under unimaginable circumstances. Captain Shaw and First Officer Kelly's immediate recognition of the danger and their attempts to avoid collision demonstrated the split-second decision-making skills that define professional aviators. Flight attendants aboard U.S. Air Flight 1493 risked their own lives to evacuate passengers from the burning aircraft, several remaining in the smoke-filled cabin until they were overcome by toxic fumes. Passengers who escaped the wreckage immediately turned back to assist others, forming human chains to guide survivors away from the flames and smoke that continued claiming lives even after the initial impact had ended. Airport firefighters and rescue personnel, working in near-zero visibility conditions, demonstrated extraordinary bravery as they entered the burning wreckage to search for survivors despite the risk of fuel explosions and structural collapse. Medical personnel at nearby hospitals worked through the night treating survivors whose injuries ranged from minor smoke inhalation to severe burns requiring specialized treatment at regional trauma centers. The coordinated response of multiple agencies, despite the challenging conditions and emotional trauma of the situation, prevented the loss of even more lives and demonstrated the importance of emergency preparedness training that had been conducted regularly at major airports throughout the country. Controller Robin Lee Washer, devastated by the consequences of her fatigue-induced error, became an advocate for air traffic control safety reforms, her personal experience driving changes that would prevent future controllers from facing similar impossible situations. The investigation's findings led to congressional hearings examining Federal Aviation Administration oversight of air traffic control operations, resulting in legislation that mandated improved rest requirements and reduced maximum duty periods for controllers nationwide. Labor organizations representing air traffic controllers used the LAX collision as evidence supporting their long-standing concerns about understaffing and excessive overtime requirements that compromised safety margins at airports throughout the United States. Washer's courage in testifying before congressional committees and safety panels, despite the personal trauma and professional consequences of the accident, provided crucial insights that shaped subsequent regulatory reforms. Her experience highlighted the need for systemic changes in how the aviation industry manages human performance factors, leading to recognition that individual blame was less important than addressing the organizational failures that created conditions where human error became inevitable. The professional air traffic control community rallied around Washer, recognizing that she had become a victim of systemic failures rather than the cause of the tragedy, leading to improved support systems for controllers involved in accidents or serious incidents. The Boeing 737 involved in the collision was eventually repaired and returned to service, though many aviation professionals questioned the wisdom of rebuilding an aircraft that had been the scene of such tragedy. U.S. Air, later merged into U.S. Airways, implemented additional crew training focused on collision avoidance and emergency evacuation procedures, while SkyWest Airlines enhanced their ground operations protocols to provide better situational awareness during taxi and runway operations. The accident prompted both airlines to review their safety management systems and invest in technologies designed to prevent similar occurrences, though the emotional toll on employees and families would persist long after the operational changes were implemented. Corporate safety cultures within both airlines underwent significant transformation as leadership recognized that technical compliance with regulations was insufficient to prevent accidents when human performance factors were not adequately addressed. Employee assistance programs expanded to provide better support for personnel dealing with the psychological aftermath of aviation accidents, while safety reporting systems encouraged voluntary disclosure of operational deficiencies that might contribute to future incidents. The insurance industry also responded to the LAX collision by requiring enhanced safety management systems and technological improvements as conditions for coverage, creating economic incentives for operators to exceed minimum regulatory requirements. Modern aviation safety culture recognizes that accidents result from chains of contributing factors rather than single points of failure, a philosophy that emerged largely from investigations like the Los Angeles Runway collision. The concept of threat and error management now permeates pilot and controller training, emphasizing the importance of recognizing developing dangerous situations before they become unrecoverable emergencies. Crew resource management techniques help aviation professionals work together more effectively under high-stress conditions, while human factors research continues identifying ways to optimize performance during critical phases of flight operations. Safety management systems implemented throughout the aviation industry provide proactive identification of hazards and risk factors that previously remained undetected until accidents occurred, allowing for preventive measures rather than reactive responses to tragedies. The just culture movement, which distinguishes between acceptable human error and unacceptable violations of safety protocols, emerged partly from recognition that punitive responses to accidents often hindered learning opportunities that could prevent future tragedies. Professional development programs for aviation personnel now include comprehensive training on fatigue management, stress recognition, and decision-making under pressure, topics that were largely ignored in 1991, but are now considered essential competencies for all safety-critical positions. Aviation psychologists studying the LAX collision identified fatigue as a more dangerous threat to safety than previously recognized, leading to research that established scientific principles governing human performance limitations during extended duty periods. These findings influenced regulatory changes affecting not only air traffic controllers, but also pilots, mechanics, and other aviation professionals whose performance directly impacts flight safety. The accident demonstrated that even highly trained, experienced professionals can make fatal errors when physiological and psychological stresses exceed human capabilities, a lesson that continues shaping safety protocols across the aviation industry. Circadian rhythm research, largely prompted by investigations into fatigue-related accidents like the LAX collision, led to better understanding of how shift work and irregular schedules affect cognitive performance and decision-making abilities. Sleep medicine specialists now work with aviation organizations to develop evidence-based fatigue management programs that protect both safety and operational efficiency, recognizing that adequate rest is not a luxury but a critical safety requirement. The integration of human factors expertise into aviation operations has become standard practice, with specialists helping design systems and procedures that account for human strengths and limitations, rather than expecting perfect performance under all conditions. Educational institutions and training organizations now use the LAX collision as a case study for teaching aviation safety principles, ensuring that future generations of pilots, controllers, and aviation professionals understand the complex interactions between human performance, technology, and organizational factors that contributed to the tragedy. Flight training programs emphasize situational awareness and threat recognition skills, designed to help pilots identify and respond to developing emergencies before they become unrecoverable situations. Air traffic control training includes extensive simulation of high workload scenarios during adverse weather conditions, providing controllers with experience managing challenging situations in controlled environments, rather than learning through real-world exposure to dangerous conditions. The accident's lessons have been incorporated into international aviation safety standards, influencing regulatory requirements and best practices worldwide as the global aviation community recognize that safety improvements in one region benefit all travelers, regardless of where they fly. The technological revolution that followed the LAX collision included development of airport surface movement radar systems capable of tracking all aircraft and ground vehicles with precision sufficient to prevent runway incursions even during zero visibility conditions. Automatic dependent surveillance broadcast systems now provide real-time position information for all equipped aircraft, eliminating the radar limitations that contributed to the 1991 tragedy. Runway status monitoring systems provide controllers with immediate alerts when unauthorized aircraft or vehicles enter active runway areas, while ground movement radar displays show aircraft positions with accuracy that was impossible using the primitive systems available 3 decades ago. Communication recording systems now capture all radio transmissions with time stamping and playback capabilities that help investigators understand the sequence of events leading to accidents or incidents. The integration of multiple safety systems creates redundant layers of protection that make accidents like the LAX collision virtually impossible under current operational standards, though the aviation industry continues seeking additional improvements to address emerging threats and challenges. International cooperation in aviation safety research increased significantly following the LAX collision, as investigators recognized that lessons learned from one accident could prevent similar tragedies worldwide. The International Civil Aviation Organization incorporated findings from the investigation into global safety standards, while bilateral agreements between aviation authorities facilitated sharing of safety information and best practices. Research partnerships between academia, industry, and government agencies accelerated development of safety technologies and training programs that addressed the human factors issues identified in the accident investigation. The global aviation safety network that exists today, providing real-time sharing of safety information and coordinated responses to emerging threats, evolved partly from recognition that isolated approaches to safety improvement were inadequate to address the complex challenges facing modern aviation operations. If you've made it this far in this story, you understand that aviation safety isn't just about technology or regulations. It's about people caring enough to learn from tragedy and demanding better from the systems that protect us all. These stories matter because they represent real families, real dreams, and real sacrifices that continue making aviation safer every single day. Consider subscribing to our channel if you believe these stories deserve to be told with the respect and thoroughness they merit, because your support helps us continue honoring the memories of those we've lost while educating others about the ongoing effort to prevent similar tragedies. Every subscription, every comment, every share helps ensure that the lessons learned from accidents like this one continue reaching people who can make a difference, whether they're aviation professionals, travelers, or simply citizens who care about safety and human dignity. Together, we can make sure that the 34 souls lost on that foggy February evening didn't perish in vain, but instead became the foundation for a safer aviation system that protects countless others who will never know how close they came to facing similar dangers. The memorial services held for the victims of both flights brought together families, friends, and aviation professionals who recognized that the 34 lives lost represented far more than statistics in an accident report. Each person who perished had contributed something unique to their communities, leaving behind legacies of love, achievement, and potential that would never be fully realized. The investigation's final report, released nearly 2 years after the collision, contained over 100 recommendations for improving aviation safety, many of which have since become standard practices throughout the global aviation industry. These changes stand as a living memorial to those who died, ensuring that their sacrifice continues protecting countless other travelers who will never know how close they came to facing similar dangers. The families of victims established scholarship funds and safety advocacy organizations that continue promoting aviation safety research and education, transforming their grief into positive action that honors their loved ones' memories. Annual memorial events at Los Angeles International Airport serve as reminders of the human cost of safety deficiencies while celebrating the improvements that have made such accidents increasingly rare in modern aviation operations. Tentar novamente ao cloud pode cometer erros. Confira sempre as respostas. Agente, Desastres da Aviação, SONET 4.